the fool does not seek understanding, but the revelation of his own heart. He doesn't seek God, he doesn't seek the truth, he doesn't seek real spiritual, he thinks he does, but he's in love basically with himself, or he's in love with the spiritual feeling. This video was made possible through the kind support of my sponsors over at Patreon. Patreon is a great way to help independent creators like myself produce original content. If you'd like to get more English language videos from me, please consider becoming a supporter via Patreon. You can find the link in the description below. Thank you very much. Shalom everyone. Today's class is called If You Want to Be Spiritual, Don't Do These Three Things. So first, some context. The context is that on Friday it was the 24th of Tevet. 24th of Tevet is the passing day of Rabbi Shneur Zalman of Liadi, who was a third generation Hassidic Rebbe and the founder of the Chabad Hassidic branch. And he passed away 213 years ago. He was 1812. And when the passing day of a tzaddik, of a righteous Jew comes along, it's a good opportunity to talk about him and his legacy and his message. I mentioned he was part of the third generation of Chassidut. So the founder of Chassidut is, of course, Rabbi Yisrael Baal Shem Tov. He started the whole thing. It was his revolution. His main disciple, the main person continuing on his path and being the teacher, the master of the second generation, is called the Maggid of Mezrich. The Maggid of Mezrich had a whole bunch of students who founded most of the great Hasidic groups. And one of them, a prominent one, was Rabbi Shneur Zalman of Liadi, the Chabad Hasidim. We call him the Alter Rebbe, the old Rebbe. This structure of three generations, three figures, echoes a basic model in Kabbalah, which is the model of the Sefirot, which is based on a threefold model of like thesis, antithesis, synthesis. So this model recurs again and again in the Sefirot. We have wisdom, understanding, and knowledge, and we have loving kindness, might, and beauty, and so on. And so these three masters, they correspond to this model. And the opposite of this is that there's something about the third generation. Every time, we had the same thing with Abraham and then Isaac and then Jacob. With the third generation, we get to a balance. Abraham was our first patriarch, but something wasn't totally balanced there, and it came about in the fact that there was one son who had to be taken out of the legacy of the lineage. It was Ishmael. Same thing happened with Yitzchak. And only with Yaakov was the people of Israel receive its name, and the balance came. And the same happens with Chassidut. The Baal Shem Tov is the first Rebbe, but there was something still incomplete. Same goes for the second generation. When you get to the third generation, it's like the Sefirah of Tiferet. Tiferet basically is the Hebrew word for harmony and balance. Tiferet also has to do with branches coming out. One of the Hebrew words for branches is pe'erot or po'arot, which is the branches coming out of the trunk. So that's why the third generation, there was a whole bunch of different rebbes, different directions, different types of interpretations of what Chassidut is all about. But like I said, the main one, the prominent one, was the Alter Rebbe. And the Alter Rebbe, he was able to strike a kind of balance that was not yet fulfilled, not yet complete in the first two generations. And this is what we want to explore today. We want to look at a very basic image or metaphor that he put on the very front page of his main book, which is the Tanya. And one of the terms that he used there, it's coming from the Talmud, from a story in the Talmud. It's a well-known term. It's called the long and short road, or the long and short path. So, background. The story in the Talmud is that we're told of Rabbi Yoshua ben Hananiah, who was one day walking in the countryside, and he reached a fork in the road. And there were two paths diverging from the crossroads, and he didn't know which one led to the city that he was looking to get to. But there was a child there, and the child seemed to know the place. So he asked the child, which path leads to the city? And he told him basically they both lead to the city, but this one is a short and long path, and this is a long and short path. Very cryptic description for a apparently very wise child. So Rabbi Yehoshua ben Hananiah, he didn't pay too much attention. He heard the first description, the short and long. He heard the word short. It caught his attention. He was in a hurry. He took the short, it was called the short and long path. He took the short path, and happily enough, very soon he saw the city looming in the horizon. He was going directly, straight as the crow flies, as we say, to the city. Unfortunately, as he went further down the road, he saw it only leads to the gardens and orchards that surround the city, to the outside of the city, to the outside gate with the gardens. It's very beautiful, but you can't really get to the city. It's either very hard or impossible to get to the city. You can enjoy the flowers and the fruit, but not the what you were looking for. So he came back, and he told the kid, "You told me it was the short path, but it's too complicated." He said, "You didn't listen. I told you it's the short and long path. It's short in the beginning because it goes straight, but then you get to an external result. You get to the external aspect of the destination of what you were trying to achieve. You get a shallow, superficial result. It's not really what you're looking for. But if you would have been more patient, and you would have taken the long and short path, that is long in the beginning. It doesn't go straight. It's a roundabout path, which means it takes longer in the beginning, and you may even feel that you're not approaching the city as you were hoping to approach it. Maybe you were hoping to get rid very quickly, but it goes in a longer way. But at the end, it goes all the way around, and you get to the city gates, and you get all the way to the inside of the city." He doesn't say it in so many words, but this is the image that's conjured in this very miniature of a story, as most Talmudic stories are like miniatures. They're very, very terse. So, and then Rabbi Yehoshua ben Hananiah is very happy, and he says, and he blesses the kid that he's such a wise young boy, and we all learn a lesson from this. Now, the Alter Rebbe put this phrase, "Bederech aruka shehi ktsara," a road that's long in the beginning but ends up being short, on the opening page of the Tanya, saying, "I'm going to explain some basic Hassidic ideas in this book, but it's not going to be a short ride. It's going to be a bit of a long ride, but ultimately you'll understand it better than if I would have given you a short little idea, a nugget of an idea." It's nice to have nuggets of ideas. It's nice to have short YouTube videos. But sometimes if you're willing to listen to a longer class, you'll come out, you'll get a better, more inner understanding of what this all is. Now, why did I call this class, if you want to be spiritual, don't do these three things, is because Chassidut is basically, it's the Jewish spiritual renewal movement. And it was all about renewing the sense of spirituality in Judaism that came to be lacking. And the sense of living in the diaspora, living in a state of exile, was going on for too many years, and people were beginning to feel the weight of the diaspora, the weight of being a homeless nation and being persecuted. And it took its toll. And the toll was that they forgot how spiritual and lively and animating and alive the Torah really is. And the Baal Shem Tov wanted to breathe new light, new life, new spirit into the yellowing pages of the Torah, and to show that it's alive, it's happening right now. And that's what we're all looking for. So the Jewish renewal, the original Jewish renewal movement, spiritual renewal, was Chassidut. But then comes so you have the first generation, second generation. You get to the third generation, you need to strike a kind of balance. You need to make sure this is not going in the wrong direction. And that means basically to add the element of maybe a more roundabout, a longer, lengthier way of doing things, but really the purpose is to make sure you really understand Chassidut, that you get to the inner core, the inner heart of Chassidut, like the inner part of the city, and you don't settle for the gardens and orchards, for the ornaments that are on the outside. So what we're going to do now is we're going to give 3 examples of how the Alter Rebbe demonstrated this method in 3 different fields, areas, levels of reality, but they really come together for a beautiful, beautiful image of his message and his legacy for us. And there's something that we all need today. Everyone who sees himself as part of this great spiritual revolution and transformation and wants to have spirituality part of their lives, that we all need these 3 lessons. The lessons that what we need to avoid, they don't do, is taking the short route in all of these 3 levels. So we're going to go, it's going to be like a ladder of topics. So we're going to start at a very grounded level, very practical level, then we're going to go to an emotional level, and then to a more intellectual level. So it's a basic, once again, a tripartite. The division within the soul also, we have the intellectual level, it's called the muskal. Below that we have the emotional level, it's called the murgash. And then we have the behavioral level, corresponds to the lower torso, and that's called the mutba. So, but we're going to go from the bottom up, the opposite order. So the first level starts with a very interesting historical observation. If you go to the academia, if you go and study the history of Chassidut in the university, or you take a book, a research book, a historical book about Chassidut, you'll very likely come across a comparison between the Hassidic revolution of the Baal Shem Tov and the French Revolution that took place some years after the Baal Shem Tov. In fact, it took place during the time of the Alter Rebbe. Right, this was 1789. As I said, he passed away 1812, and it was during his lifetime, during the time that he was working, that he was teaching. And the comparison goes like this. The French Revolution was all about bringing down the ancient regime, the old regime, the monarchy and the nobility. And there were the upper classes. They were very, very disconnected from the people, the masses. The famous line of if the people don't, the Marie Antoinette line, if the people don't have bread, they should eat cake, demonstrates its total disconnect. And at some point the people have had enough, and then they stormed the Bastille, and they took off the kings, and they took off all the elites that were governing, and they replaced the monarchy with a republic. And this was the beginning of the modern ideal of a republic, of a democracy, of the state governed by the people. A republic means res public, a public matter, a public affair. We don't want the kings, we don't want the hierarchies, we don't want people on top telling us what to do. And thus began basically the modern state. The modern world in many ways was born with the French Revolution. So the comparison goes, the Baal Shem Tov did something similar, but in a more religious, spiritual context and in a far smaller scale within the Jewish people. You had the Talmidei Chachamim, the wise scholars who knew a lot of Torah. They were in the yeshivot. But there was a big disconnect between those wise scholars and the simple Jews. The simple Jews were working, they didn't go to study in the yeshivot, and they were looked down upon by those wise sages. And you also had the moral preachers. The moral preachers would go from town to town, and they would rebuke all the simple people that they should be more observant, or they should learn more, or they should be more God-fearing, and so on. And the Baal Shem Tov all of a sudden revolutionized all of this. He said, the simple Jew is in many, many respects much higher than the most wise scholar. Why? Because they're more authentic. Their honest simplicity, their temimut, their sincerity in serving God is far, far more important than how many Talmudic tractates you've learned and you've memorized. And then you have all these famous stories about a simple Jew who doesn't know how to daven. They're illiterate. They don't even know how to read the prayers, but they can just whistle, or they can say kukuriku, like cock-a-doodle-doo. They can make the sound like the sound of a rooster. And that's their prayer. And he said that prayer is far better, far higher, far more real, and reaches far higher than all of everything that we are able to do, we who learn. And he would send his students, the scholars, to go and observe a simple shepherd, a simple beggar, and to learn their ways. And he took the Torah out of the Beit Midrash, out of the hands of the elites, and would give very simple Torot teachings. And that, the similarity is very clear, very obvious. However, it's not so simple. It was only in recent years that we were granted permission to read the protocols of the interrogations that the Alter Rebbe, Vishneur Zalman of Vladi, whom we're talking about today, he was arrested. So that's the famous Yutet Kislev, the New Year of Chassidut, is the day that he was released from prison, that he was imprisoned by the Russians, and he was interrogated. There was a whole story. He was falsely accused of being a traitor, and he was arrested, and he spent 53 days in imprisonment, and they interrogated him, and he ended up being acquitted of all charges and released. But only in recent years were the protocols discovered. And it turns out that one of the things they accused him of, and this wasn't known before, was that he was colluding with the French revolutionaries, which were a big threat to the Tsarist regime in Russia. The last thing they wanted is to have a similar kind of revolution in Russia. They finally had it in the 20th century. It was the communist revolution, which was obviously influenced by the French Revolution. It wasn't democracy, it was communism, but many of the ideals were the same. So they were very much afraid of this. And if you collude, if you're a part of the French Revolution, so they accused him of this. And he was acquitted of that also. So we could guess that maybe one of the reasons they accused him of this is because of this comparison, that Chassidut seems to be in line with the kind of mentality or thinking of the French Revolution. However, if you know a little bit about the Alter Rebbe and his history and his outlook, he was vehemently opposed to the French Revolution. He hated the French Revolution. He was totally against it. And when Napoleon started conquering Europe and advancing towards the east, he thought that this is going to be a disaster for not only Russia, but for the Jews as well. He saw that Napoleon is bringing a spirit of, so there were two levels. So why was he so opposed? He said, on the most simplest level, Napoleon is bringing the spirit of emancipation. He's going to give rights to the Jews. That appears like a good thing. But he says, we know from history that whenever the doors from the non-Jewish world, they open up and Jews are welcome, they start assimilating and they lose their Jewish identity. And it's far better to live under the Tsarist rule, even if we don't have so many rights, and we're not as accepted or welcomed. But it's better spiritually to be under these conditions, live under the Tsar, than to live under this kind of republic or democracy that Napoleon is bringing with the emancipation. But of course, it's deeper than that. Basically, he realized that if you sanctify the ideal of equality, of everything being equal, of everything being egalitarian, as much as the Baal Shem Tov, by the way, they were born on the same day, right? The first generation, third generation, 24th Tevet, which we now celebrate, it's the passing only of the Alter Rebbe, but they were born on the same day, so they were very much connected. They barely met. They met once when the Alter Rebbe was a child, but he called the Baal Shem Tov his grandfather, his spiritual grandfather. So he very much believed in the same things the Baal Shem Tov believed, that all Jews are equal, that in many ways all people are equal, that all the hierarchies are in a way illusory, and you need to look at, even if you're very wise or very knowledgeable, you also have to remember you really know nothing, and you have to look at the simple Jew or the simple person, learn from them, and so on. He knew all this, he accepted all this, but he said once you sanctify the idea of everything being equal, then all opinions and all worldviews become equal, And then there's no such thing as holy or profane, as lofty or mundane. And you don't just decapitate the physical king, you also spiritually, theologically, you decapitate the king of kings, God. You would end up with such an intense secularism that would make fun of anything spiritual. It's better to have the Tsar with the church and with the Christianity, because at least you have a sense of loftiness, of romemut, of something that's higher. And the general atmosphere is that there is a God. And we were debating if it's Christianity or Judaism, but that's a much better debate, whether it's the way is the Christian way or the Jewish way, and how they can be reconciled. It's a much better debate to have than whether God even exists. If the whole atmosphere around you is an atmosphere that mocks religion and mocks the idea that there is something in heaven, there is something above. So if you sanctify, you idolize the idea of equality, the horizontal axis, you get rid of the vertical axis, there's no transcendent, nothing is transcendent, and then it's a far worse world. We have the same thing today. We have an Orthodox Jew can see eye to eye in many things with a Christian because they both believe, with all the differences, they both believe there is a God, there is something transcendent, someone created the world, there's a moral order, there's a world to come, there's justice, we're looking forward to a messianic age, so many things. But then they feel together, they can work together in many ways, vis-a-vis a very, very secular world that mocks religion. And this is the reason that Jews get along with, religious Jews, they get along with non-Jewish conservatives much more than they get along with non-Jewish liberals, who tend to be far more secular. So he basically saw this. And he said, yes, the Baal Shem Tov talked about not idolizing the hierarchy, not idolizing the class mentality, that you have someone who's wiser and someone who's less wise, and then you can be arrogant, and then the one who's above needs to look down. He wants to cancel that, but it's a far more subtle game. You have to have equality while still having this vertical axis of looking to above and then you do have the king, the king of kings that's above everyone, and you do have the tzaddik. But the tzaddik tells you have to also learn from the simple Jews. It's a much more interesting, nuanced perspective that combines hierarchy with equality. If it's only hierarchy, it's horrible. Then you have this, people become arrogant and people feel lowly in a bad sense, and it doesn't work. But if you only have equality, it's also negative. So what is here the short and long path? It's the short and long path to equality, to the idea of equality. If you want equality, if you want to feel that everyone has their own perspective, their own view, and you can learn something from everyone, it's a wonderful, wonderful thing. It's true, you can learn something from everyone. And everyone can teach someone. And there is a very deep kind of equality between all living beings and all human beings and all Jews and so on. But it has to go along with, but there's also this idea of transcendence, of spiritual elevation, the spiritual elevation of going up a spiritual ladder, and also having a tzaddik that you feel you can receive from them. Then you have a spiritual influencer, a spiritual receiver, and then that's a good balance. That's what you need. So it's a long path towards equality, goes through accepting this hierarchy or a hierarchical element. Now, interestingly enough, this was not so obvious to everyone. And the Alter Rebbe, he had a big debate with another great Hasidic Rebbe, who was with him back in the days that they studied under the Maggid of Mezrich. His name was the Maggid of Koznitz. And the Maggid of Koznitz thought otherwise. He thought we should all pray and daven for Napoleon to win. Napoleon will give us rights and will give us a better... So it's not a simple thing. You had two great masters, two great rabbis, one in Poland, who said we should all pray, and these people, they believe in prayer, right? Their prayers they can really change the world. So you had two giants, spiritual giants, arguing. One is praying that Napoleon will win, and the other one is praying that Napoleon will lose. One is in Poland, one is in Russia. And then they decided that it's going to be decided, they had this agreement somehow, that it's going to be decided on Rosh Hashanah, on New Year's Day, And it all depends on who will blow the shofar first. Or the blowing of the shofar will determine somehow this thing. So very early morning, in Rosh Hashanah, the Alter Rebbe got up and he blew the shofar very early in the morning, maybe before the prayers, maybe he rushed the prayers, I don't know what he did exactly, but he blew the shofar. And on the other part of Europe, in Poland, the Maggid of Koznitz said, he got to it before me. He's going to succeed. And it turns out that Napoleon wasn't able to get to all the way that he wanted into Poland and Russia. And the animosity that the Alter Rebbe had towards Napoleon was so great that he actually was fleeing. The reason he died when he died, in the middle of winter, he wasn't so old, he was like 67. He was running away from Napoleon. And in fact, he burnt his own home. He didn't want Napoleon to enjoy anything that he would leave behind. And then he passed away as he was running away. And then that's where he's buried, not in the place where he lived, where he taught. He's buried in Hadich, a different place. He was running away. They smuggled his corpse in midwinter in the snow to the place that he wanted to get buried, which was nearby. And so that's a very important part of the whole end of his life story. So this is just to show that you have this superficial similarity between the French Revolution and Chassidut. And again, the Maggid of Koznitz thought it wasn't superficial. He thought there was something real going on. But the Alter Rebbe felt that this was wrong. And really the message is that you can't sanctify the idea of equality, of everything being equal, because then you get to a very superficial world that you have no truth, and everyone's opinion is just as equal, and then you have to respect a religion that's 4,000 years old, and some whatever new theory that came along yesterday, you have to say, everything's equal, or whatever you feel like is equal, and so on. And all this is, and then you lose sight of the transcendent and of truth, and so on. So that's the first message, and the first long and short path that he taught us. Part one. Part two. This is, in many ways, when he put this term of you have to take the long and short path on the cover of the Tanya, this is basically what he meant is the second level. Second level is now we're talking about not politics, not ideologies, we're talking about the heart. He said the heart also has a pnimiyut, an inner dimension, and a chitzoniyut, an outer dimension. If you go the short and long path, if you try to reach the heart directly by letting go of the mind, letting go of the intellect, don't think, feel, awaken your heart, do whatever your heart pleases, whatever your heart wishes, just do it. All these slogans that are all about, it was the idea, going back to ideologies, this is the romanticism. A romantic view, even of Chassidut, would lead you to settling for the outer heart. It would be the more superficial emotions. It's like the outer ornaments. You would get excited quickly and it would subside quickly. You would get wrapped up in some emotion, it's like falling in love. It can happen very quickly, but it can go away just as quickly as it came. And why? Because it's not the deeper layers, the deeper levels of the heart. And that's a risk that happens when you try to reach the heart in a very direct way by saying, let's just stop thinking and getting rid of the mind, getting rid of the intellect, and just focus on feelings. It also has to do with looking for spiritual experiences, for intense spiritual experiences. People want a mystical experience. They want a mystical revelation of the divine. They don't want to just think about it, they want to experience it. Now, Chassidut is very much about the heart. Chassidut is saying that, it's repeating what the Zohar said. The Zohar said, Rachamana liba ba'e, the God, the gracious one, the merciful one, God. Really what he wants is he wants your heart. If it's just the head, you're just thinking about things. You're distant, you're detached. The head is cool and calculated and detached, and it looks at objects of thought. There's an object of thought, and you objectify it. You have to even kill it in a way in order to think about it, to analyze it. And this is what Chassidut fought against. It fought against this kind of cerebral, intellectual Judaism. It was all about putting the heart back in its place as the main thing. And Chassidut, the word chesed, that's the first attribute of the heart, is the love, the giving. And so Chassidut is all about the heart. But the Alter Rebbe, in his book, the Tanya, he said, yes, of course, the heart is the goal. But which path do you take to the heart? You need to be very careful. Because if you go straight, in a straight line, directly to the heart, and you awaken only the outside of it, and it could be very misleading. The outside of the heart, the exterior of the heart is short-sighted. And sometimes you could be excited not by the real thing. You could be excited by illusory things, imaginary things. You could get, it could be just your wishful thinking, just your own subjective wishes or fears. And you wouldn't tell the difference between that and real spirituality, a real spiritual experience, a real spiritual grasping of a truth, a super-rational truth as opposed to a sub-rational a pre-rational emotion that's just childish, basically. And the verse that goes along with this is the verse "Lo yachpot ksil bitvuna ke'im behidgalot libo." The fool does not seek understanding, but the revelation of his own heart. He doesn't seek God. He doesn't seek the truth. He doesn't seek real spiritual. He thinks he does. But he's in love basically with himself, or he's in love with the spiritual feeling. It's just like there's a phrase that was said about Romanticism, that there was this person who wrote a big book about the history of romantic love in the West. And he said that the classical Western lovers, like Romeo and Juliet, all the romantic tradition, they don't really love each other. They love falling in love. They love the experience of falling in love. And so it's very similar. You can consider yourself someone very spiritual, but really you're in love with spiritual experience, with the mystical experience. That's what you're looking for. That's not looking for Hashem. That's looking for yourself as connecting to what you feel to be Hashem, because then you feel your own spiritual experience. If you have a true spiritual experience, that could be a true gift from above that wakes you up. Sometimes the only way to wake up, if you are very unspiritual in the beginning, is you're suddenly granted a mystical experience. It takes you out of your rational mindset that it's all about just a material outlook or just about material, possessions or money or whatever it is you're looking for. It's totally this worldly. And then you get a jolt from above. You're awakened. And this could be happening of its own. It could be induced chemically. It can be induced by a trauma, by having an accident or being in a fearful. All kinds of things can happen. And then you were granted like a gift. It's like a gift. You got a glimpse of something mystical, something beyond. That doesn't mean that now you have to pursue that experience. Or it doesn't even mean that now you have to make sure other people get the same experience, because it's not up to you to generate. If they come across it, because it's not the thing we're looking for, is to have more and more spiritual experiences. This is totally the external levels of the heart. This is the gardens and orchards. It's not the real divine revelation and connection. The real divine revelation and connection is when you're given a purpose and you're given a mission, and now you want to bring the spiritual light into the world. You only need one spiritual experience in your life, which it's not up for you to generate, because if you try to generate it, it means you're losing yourselves in the gardens and orchards. It comes to you. And once it came to you, you got that glimpse. It could be even a little experience, could be large, whatever it is. You don't need anything else. And that will fuel you for the rest of your life, because now the thing is not getting more and more revelations or experiences. Now the thing is, how do I translate godliness and spirituality in my soul that have been opened up to me into a moral life, into a holy life, into a refined life, It's going back to how do I behave and how do I operate, how do I work in this world. How do you make sure you don't lose yourself in the gardens and orchards of the exteriority of the heart, and you connect to the inner, refined, subtle experience of the inner heart with the mind, with the intellect, with learning, with thinking, with having a critical faculty. The short path to the heart is forget the mind, forget the intellect, let's try and recreate that spiritual experience to feel that intense feeling, and you want to rush, and you'll be stuck in the gardens and orchards, and you'll be addicted to those experiences, and you'll lose yourselves there. And you can see that the Alter Rebbe saw it in Chassidut, even in Chassidut, that what they did, many people, they would start dancing and clapping and getting into ecstasy. And he said, this ecstasy, that's not Hashem, that's you in love with your own spiritual experience. And the long and short path is being more of an intellectual. That's why his Chassidut is Chassidut, it's the heart, Chesed. But it's Chassidut, Chabad. Chabad is Chokhmah Binah Dat, wisdom, understanding, and knowledge. It's the path, it's the means, it's not the goal. But the means here, it's a means to the goal being the spiritual, emotional experience. If you learn Chassidut well, the Tanya is a book that you learn. You don't just read it and then you look for an experience. He even felt, the Alter Rebbe, that if you just learn the Baal Shem Tov and the Maggid, the first two generations, their teachings were very short and intense, and it was like little concentrated pills, and you would give you a wow experience. He said, that's great, I learned from that also, but it's not enough. Now you have to open it up and learn it. And not just YouTube shorts, it has to be long form videos of learn Chassidut well, and then you'll be able to tell the difference between a kind of external ecstatic spirituality and a far more refined and subtle spirituality, which is not a wow spirituality, but it's a still small voice that's with you all the time, and you're able to tell the difference between that and being just excited about all kinds of intuitions and feelings that come from the external fire of your heart. You know, we just read about Moses. The revelation of Moses was a bush that had fire, but it was not consumed by the fire. The fire is emotional, but the fact that you're not consumed by the fire comes from your intellect, from your head, that you're looking at it from the outside. So the head, the intellect, it's not the goal. It's a means to the goal, and it leads you to the inner level of the heart. Basically, we can say that you have the external level of the heart, above that you have the head, the intellect, and above that you have the inner heart, the interiority of the heart, the pnimiyut halev. So this, the second message, or the second kind of long and short path, is how do you get to the heart, to the emotions, to a very vibrant and alive and authentic spiritual experience that's not detached, not intellectual. Racham al by the merciful God, He wants your heart, your presence, your real presence, but not in a way that you fall in love with your own experience, your own connection. You really put yourself aside, and the way you put yourself aside is through being rational, cognitive, learning, thinking, and not succumbing to your spiritual fantasies or your emotional fantasies and wishes. You put them aside, you're critical of them, and then what's left after you push them all away, basically the mind, the intellect, screens the external emotions, you vet them, and then what you're left with is a true, authentic spirituality, which is not about you, it's about what you need to do, what you're called upon to do. So this is the second teaching, the second message that was very central to the Alter Rebbe's figure and life and teachings, and has to do very much with the founding of Chabad. By the way, there was a debate with another great Hasidic master. Just like in the first one, this time it was with the actual grandson of the Baal Shem Tov, Reb Baruch of Mezhibuzh. Reb Baruch of Mezhibuzh, again, genetic, real grandson of the Baal Shem Tov. Maybe there was a little bit of envy. He didn't like maybe the Alter Rebbe calling the Baal Shem Tov his grandfather. Mm-hmm. He's my grandfather. Mm-hmm. And he said, you're straying from the path of my grandfather and of the Maggid of Mezrich, the two first generations. and you say we could lose ourselves in our gardens and orchards, but what you're doing, we could get lost in intellect, in learning and thinking, and over the complex books that you have and the longer essays that you have. That's not what my grandfather taught. That's not what the Maggid taught. So again, the whole thing is a subtle affair. You had a great master who didn't like this approach, but the Hasidim, the Chabad Hasidim, the students of the Alter Rebbe, addressed this. They said, yes, you always have to make sure you don't idolize the intellect. You don't make the intellect the ideal. And in fact, in the second generation, this is now the second generation of Chabad, fourth generation of Chassidut, you always have to, if the wheel goes too much in one direction, you have to steer it in the other direction. The son of the Alter Rebbe wrote a whole treatise about, yes, we're Chabadniks, yes, we don't like external excitement, ecstatic excitement like my father taught. Yes, we have to operate with the wisdom and knowledge and wisdom, understanding and knowledge, but it's just a means, it's not the goal. It has to lead, you have to be excited, you have to feel the heart. So it goes back and forth, because he felt that the message of the Alter Rebbe of don't settle, don't get excited by the outside, the external experiences, use your head, went too far. So we had to say, yes, we're using our head, but we don't want to be intellectuals. That's not what Chassidut is about. We don't want to be professors in the university. So they took care of it. There was like a self-balancing mechanism. How do you call it? A tuning. Like there's another word, a self-tuning. There's another word of regulating. There was like a regulating mechanism within Chabad. To try and make sure that this doesn't happen, what the Baruch of Mezhibush was worried about. Okay, the third one is, now we get to the intellectual level. When the Alter Rebbe was young, he had a debate within himself where he should go and study. And he was also on two roads forking, metaphorical, two roads forking from a crossroads. One road led to Vilna, to where the Vilna Gaon, which is called the Hagra, the leader of the Lithuanian Jewry, which was against Chassidut, it opposed Chassidut. It's the Misnagdim, the Mitnagdim, those who opposed Chassidut. And the main thing there was learning Torah, again, very intellectual, and no, don't look for spiritual experiences at all. Chassidut is a bad thing, just learning. And the other road led to Mezrich, to the Maggid, the student of Baal Shem Tov, to study Chassidut. And he said the following, he said, in Vilna, you learn how to study. In Mezrich, you learn how to daven, to pray. I think I already know a little bit about studying. That's what he said. Of course, he was this great genius. When he was 13, he was given all the most prestigious titles you can imagine. But he modestly said, I know a little bit of learning, but I have no idea what it's like to daven, really. I don't really know how to daven. I'm going to go to Mezrich. He went to Mezrich. He became a central figure of the third generation of Chassidut and the founder of Chabad. But the fact that he debated this tells us something about his character. And really what he tells us, and this is the third long and short path, if you want to be a chassid, if you want to be spiritual, you want to be a mystic, you want to go for the inner dimension of the Torah, you also need to put a lot of weight, a lot of attention to the revealed level of the Torah, not just the hidden mystical level of the Torah, which is the level of Jewish law. Learning the laws, learning the particulars of the law, learning halakha. And in fact, it was explained about him that his name, Shnei Or, means two lights, because both lights, the lights of the revealed Torah, the light of the hidden Torah, was as precious to him. And in fact, he was unique among Hasidim to not just write these amazing, very profound spiritual Hasidic treatises, but also to write another edition of the Shulchan Aruch, of the most basic book, textbook of Jewish law. That he wrote an edition of it, adding Hasidic laws or changing some things that were more up to date according to the Hasidic view and according to his own ruling. And this is studied in all the yeshivot, by the way. It's also studied in the Lithuanian yeshivot. They don't like Chassidut, but they like the halachic book that he wrote. And he was very much with his feet planted on both realms, both sides of what the Torah is. And basically his warning was, if you want a lot of Chassidut, a lot of spiritual light, you need, just as you're strengthening the light, you need to strengthen the vessels. Being spiritual, the Jewish way of being spiritual, having all those lights, is being very, very strict with the laws. It goes together. This is why Hasidim, on the whole, became more strict and more machmirim, right? More, I don't know what the word is exactly, taking less risks, being more on the safe side, or going in the more severe, or more, being more careful with the laws, and being extra careful in adding, to the prohibitions, because they said this is guarding the kind of intense spirituality that we're having. It goes together. And this is an amazing, of course, very, very important message to anyone who's experiencing a spiritual awakening today. This is wonderful and great. But the way Judaism works is light within vessels, and halacha is gematria kli, vessel. Halacha is the big, basic vessel of Judaism. The more spiritual and the more intensely connected you are to Jewish spirituality, to the mystical level, the hidden level, you have to be grounded on the revealed level also. So the long and short path to spirituality goes along with being more, having the sense of being obligated and not being above the law, and basically also experiencing Hashem as a king or lawgiver, not just as a kindly father who loves you and wants this connection with you. You need both. Avinu Malkeinu, our father, our king, has to go totally together. That was his two lights, and that was his message. Of course, all three levels totally connect one to the other. All of them have to do with having a sense of a supernal governing force that's above you. The first level has to do with there's a king of kings above us, and we don't sanctify equality. There's someone above us. And that's the same goes with the idea of the intellect governing the heart, the head governing the heart. And that's like also God telling us, use your head. I also gave you a head, not just a heart. And it's all these top-down levels. And the same goes for accepting the yoke of Torah, Kabbalat ol mitzvot, the yoke of the commandments. All these, they take me away in the beginning from what I like, what appeals to me, what I want, which is the more inner experience and the feeling that we're all equal and everyone has their own spiritual connection, and it's all about heart, and it's all about connecting, and it's all about the emotion and feeling and the experience, and the longer path gives you the boundaries, the vessels, the structure in which to put all of this, and basically it totally works together. The more you have the sense of I'm not above the law, I'm accepting all the little laws of Judaism, and that keeps me modest, it keeps me humble, it keeps me grounded, and then I have to also use my head. I have to learn the Jewish law. You learn the Jewish law. It's not an emotional experience. You have to learn it and understand it and observe it and keep it. And all these things, they refine and they connect us to the spiritual levels in a much, much deeper and better way. So this is our summing up or review of the three basic lessons that the Alter Rebbe taught us, and I'm not the best example of any of them, especially the last one, I have to say. But this class, when you teach a class, you also teach yourself. You say the class, and you hope you can really, you hope you to be your own student one day, and so this was for me also a lesson, and that's it. Maybe we should all really connect and be able to observe all this. Hi everyone, if you enjoyed this episode, please press like, subscribe to the channel, and leave a comment. If you want more English language videos from me, please consider becoming a supporter via Patreon. You can find the link in the description below. Thank you very much, and see you in the next episode.